You're listening to the HawgBeat Hour with Andrew Hutchinson, Alex Trader, and Mason Choate on ESPN Arkansas and HitThatLine.com. Now, here's your host, Mason Choate.
Welcome to the HawgBeat Hour. I'm your host, Mason Choate, joined by Andrew Hutchinson and Alex Trader as always. We're the HawgBeat crew here to give you the HawgBeat Hour. And before we get started, I just want to remind you it is HawgBeat.com, HawgBeat, BEAT.com. Go check it out and subscribe because you don't want to miss out on all the great content that we've got. We've hit the overlap, Hutch, of spring football, baseball, and basketball. So that means that you're going to be getting the best content on all of your favorite sports for the Razorbacks over at HawgBeat.com. And Hutch, student deal still going on?
Yeah, it is. If you're a student at the U of A or any other college where you have a .edu email address, shoot me an email at andrewhutchinson413@gmail.com, and I will hook you up for your first year of HawgBeat for just $11.95. That's usually about $100. So that's a pretty good deal. And if you're a college student, I know trying to save money wherever you can and you still want great coverage of the Razorbacks, well, there's your chance right there. So hit me up and I'll get you hooked up.
That is worth your money. And also go over to the HawgBeat YouTube, hit subscribe there, and put a like on. If you're watching this on YouTube right now, give a like on it. That definitely helps out as well. So, all right, guys, spring football starting this weekend. Hutch, you've had your burning question series going for spring ball. I know your most recent one was on Tuesday about how's Arkansas going to replace Treylon Burks. So we can get into that, but just to start a spring football, what are you looking forward to? What do you think is going to happen? Just go ahead and break that down.
Yeah, I mean, it's an exciting time because it's our first look at the 2022 Razorbacks. You know, we know that 2021 was a really successful year, top 25, 9 wins, Outback Bowl win. Just a really exciting time for Arkansas football. But there are some questions. You know, it's trending up, but we still got to figure out, you know, one of my first burning question, I think we talked about it before, is who's going to be at left tackle. You know, Myron Cunningham is gone. How are they going to fill Treylon Burks' shoes, which I think is maybe even a bigger question because you could make the case that Treylon Burks was the best wide receiver in school history, and I would argue for that. And so you're probably not going to get one guy step up and be that dude. I know everyone's pointing to Jaden Hazelwood, the former 5-star recruit transfer from Oklahoma, is like, hey, that could be him. I'm not convinced yet. I mean, I want to see what he looks like in spring ball. I want to see how he, you know, kind of develops that chemistry with KJ Jefferson. I think that's one reason Burks and KJ were so good last year was they just had that connection. Who else is going to be that guy? I mean, Warren Thompson had some flashes, but he also had some drops. You have Keitron Jackson that played a lot last year, but didn't exactly have a lot of production. He's a true freshman last year, and that's another, you know, top, you know, Rivals 250 guy. You've got the incoming guys. Only one of them are going to be here though, and that's Quincy McAdoo, an in-state 4-star Rivals 250. I mean, there's a common theme here. They've got a lot of talent, you know, these top 250 recruits, but none of them have really been proven at the college level. And, you know, to be the guy. I mean, there's been some complimentary pieces here and there, but we don't know who's going to step up and fill those shoes from Treylon Burks. So that's kind of stuff you want to hopefully you can get figured out during spring ball, and that starts on Sunday.
I'm curious. This is a question that I always have in my head right now going into spring ball is what's the running back position going to look like? Because you don't have your Treylon Smith there anymore. So I feel like it's probably going to be Dominic Johnson leading the running back room based off of how the season ended. But I mean, you've still got AJ Green, you still got Rocket Sanders. I know that they've talked about maybe moving one of those guys to wide receiver, but Hutch, what do you think about the running back room? And Alex, if you have any opinions on that as well, you can get in on it.
Yeah, so I mean, they've got a wealth of running back talent. I mean, we've seen all three of those guys have looked really good. I mean, there's a reason Arkansas, you know, was I think led the FBS in terms of rushing yards per game, or led the Power 5 teams in that. I think they were top 5 or something like that overall. That's impressive whenever you don't have a 1,000-yard running back. Obviously, KJ running like he does helps, but Dominic Johnson, really good physical running back. You've got Rocket Sanders, who has a little bit of physicality to him, maybe a little bit more home run ability than Dominic. And then you've got AJ Green, who if he gets a crease, he's gone. He's got that speed, that track speed. Then you add a guy like Rashad Dubinion, incoming freshman, 4-star guy. You've got James Jointer, freshman, coming in. They're both going to be here during spring. So it's going to be interesting to see how they divide up those snaps, those carries, because they've got a lot of guys. And I still don't know if they're going to have a 1,000-yard rusher in 2022. And I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing because you can keep all those guys fresh. I mean, could you imagine having a fresh Dominique Johnson running at a worn-down defense in the fourth quarter? I like Arkansas's chances with that.
Yeah. Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, no, I was just going to piggyback on that last point there. If you did it by committee last year and you saw the SEC's leading rushing offense, and not only that, but also you're seeing guys come in and say, hey, I can get that top level production, get that recognition on the national stage, and still be fresh whenever it comes time for me to potentially go to the next level. That's a deal that you're going to take with running backs. And you obviously want to make sure you're winning the games first. But if you can help yourself in recruiting while doing that as well and give yourself another feather in the cap, that's a major point for you to have as a staff. So I think they're, like Hutch said, they're definitely going to go with the if it's not broke, don't fix it approach this year and continue that committee. I do think it is interesting, though, how with Traylon Smith gone, is there going to be another head coming onto that monster of Rocket Sanders and Dom Johnson and AJ Green, or are they just going to leave those three alone, let the younger guys develop and see what happens there?
Alex, I'm going to let you go back to back because I want to ask you about some of the newcomers, maybe a freshman, maybe a transfer. Leave Hazelwood out of it because we've already mentioned him, but who are you looking forward to seeing the most here in spring ball of the newcomers?
I think the skilled positions are really interesting this year. I think, like Hutch said, Quincy McAdoo is a guy who could potentially break through. The linebacker room is also going to be really interesting, seeing if Jordan Crook's able to kind of make an impact without a whole lot of experience at that position group. Offensive line, I think I don't know that he has a chance of starting as a freshman, but I know that Sam Pittman's very, very excited about Andrew Chamblee. You've got a massive, massive freshman coming in Amarian Harris. So I think there's definitely a wealth of talent to look at. I'll probably have to go with Jordan Crook at the linebacker position just because there is so much uncertainty there as is that he really could, with a strong spring, make a push to be a contributor in his freshman season.
All right. Hutch, before we move on to Pro Day, just give us kind of a rundown of so spring football starts on Sunday. Do we know anything else of the schedule, like practice schedules moving forward from there?
Yeah, so first practice is on Sunday, and then they're also going to practice on Tuesday and Wednesday of this week. And then you've got spring break. So they're going to get like a full week off. And then once they get back from spring break, they're going to go Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday for, I guess, 4 more weeks. And you've got the spring. Well, so here's the deal with the spring game. You're not going to get a traditional red-white spring game this year. It's a little bit weird, unique, different. April 16th, they're going to have an open practice. That's going to basically serve as a spring game. That's when they're having all the recruits come. That's when they're going to let all the fans in. They're going to scrimmage that day. But it's probably not going to be your traditional, red team versus white team. Let's keep a score, that kind of thing. It's going to be just your basic scrimmage, like what sometimes the media gets to watch. And you're going to see, the ones versus the twos versus the ones, maybe a little bit of one-on-ones, 2s on 2s, 3s on 3s. You're going to get probably some situational work, third long, red zone, deep red zone, things like that. But the reason that is because they originally going to schedule to complete spring ball on the 23rd. Well, your stadium's going to be occupied by a guy named Garth Brooks that day. He kind of takes precedent, I guess, with that concert at Razorback Stadium. So I believe, based on my conversations I had at Pro Day, I think they're actually going to conclude spring ball on that Friday because they got to get out of their facilities So that way all the Garth Brooks concert people can get everything set up on that day. So that's why you're going to have kind of your spring game on a Saturday, and then you still have 3 practices after that. That's a little bit unique. I know under Chad Morris, I know we don't like to talk about him, but they had, they'd have the spring game and then one more practice to kind of like go through a walkthrough and like make corrections or whatever after it. But 3 practices after it, that's a little bit unique. And also probably why they're not doing a full-blown red-white game on the 16th. So it's a little bit of a weird kind of schedule, but yeah, that's kind of how it's going to lay out. 15 practices total, basically starting Sunday, going through the 22nd or 23rd of April.
All right. Sounds good. Glad we got that out there. Now we got to talk. So Arkansas had its pro day this week. I feel like a lot of times people, including myself, read in too much to the numbers that come from the pro days and the NFL Combine. A lot of people freaked out that Traylon Burks only ran a 4.55, only a 4.55, because everybody thought, I guess, he was 4.4 or something. But you get from him, like, go watch my tape, and you can go listen to his interviews, and everybody else who took part at Arkansas's pro day. All of their interviews are over at HawgBeat.com, plus some film as well that Hutch was able to get. But go check that out. But let's just talk about it, Hutch. Give us your big takeaways from pro day, some stuff that you like, some stuff you didn't like, I guess. I know a lot of people were freaking out that Burks had 12 reps on the bench, but another thing, like, you're probably reading into it too much.
Yeah, if you're not going to draft Traylon Burks just because he ran a 4.55 or did 12 reps in the bench press or whatever, then you're an idiot. And that's probably why you're picking high in the draft every year, because Traylon Burks is an incredible wide receiver. I would take him over pretty much everybody. I know Alex may, feel differently about a handful of guys, but to me, he's a surefire first-round draft pick, and he's going to contribute immediately as a rookie. And if you've got a quarterback and you need somebody for him to throw it to, I think Traylon Burks is the guy. And so I fully think he's fine. Regardless of what he does in the combine, or he plays football. But aside from him, he's the headliner. I thought Grant Morgan had a really nice pro day. He put up some good numbers. He told us, he's like, hey, I'm not a 4.5 guy, so you're not going to see me go run super fast. I think he said it was somewhere in the high 4.7s, low 4.8s. But he did do well in the vertical. And he was only like an inch and a half, smaller vertical than Traylon Burks, which surprised me. I did not realize he was that athletic. He had a solid broad jump. He did really good in the bench press. I think he had like 21 reps or something. I think he's given himself a chance. I don't think he's going to get drafted, but I think he's going to be one of those guys that gets a call as soon as the draft ends and gets an undrafted free agent spot and gets to kind of pick where he goes. And I think he's going to have a chance to stick, whether it be on a practice squad, something like that. I think Tyson Morris had a really good, showing as far as, his testing and stuff. Again, I don't see him getting drafted by any means or even maybe sticking on an NFL roster, but he's given himself a chance to get invited to a camp. And that's what you got to do at these pro days, is just impress the team enough to where they invite you to come out and get a chance. So I think those two guys maybe were the guys that stood out to me at pro day.
Yeah, I was kind of going to piggyback off that and ask Alex, of these guys, aside from Burks, obviously, and now probably Morgan and Morris, is there a guy that you look at from Arkansas, maybe the way he performed at pro day? We know that they also had a couple other guys at the combine, but any of these guys that you think might have a chance of getting drafted? We know Burks is going to get drafted, but I mean, you still got John Ridgeway, Trey Williams. I don't know how often a long snapper gets drafted, but Jordan Silver. I mean, Hutch has a story about that somewhere. Go find that. But Alex, go ahead.
Yeah, I think you hit it with those two guys. Is John Ridgeway is someone who showed what he's able to do at Arkansas this season. Did it at I believe it was Southern Illinois or Illinois State. It was Illinois State. Did it there at the FCS level. Was able to translate that over to D1 SEC football at Arkansas. And I think are probably going to be able to see him translate that again to the NFL. So I think he's definitely someone that's worth taking a flyer on. If you're an NFL team, maybe not, not a first round pick, maybe not a first or second day pick, but definitely someone who in those late rounds is worth definitely taking a look at. As far as the pro day goes, I was kind of wrapped up with tests and some other things, being a student, but I think, like Hutch said, there are some athletes on this Arkansas team, and maybe you didn't necessarily see that same level of production shine through in years past. So it'll be really interesting to see how Arkansas is perceived as far as those undrafted free agent deals go now compared to what they were maybe a couple of years ago under a certain other coaching staff.
And I'm also going to add on to that in that sometimes you just never know what's going to happen. A guy that comes to mind is Ramsey. He's a guy that I watched him every year in spring practice, and he was just incredible as a linebacker. They moved him a little bit to play some defensive end. I mean, they moved him all over the place, and I was like, man, this guy is really good, and he would never produce in the season. They couldn't get him on the field. It was just really weird, but he had a good pro day, tested well, got a chance, I believe, with the Packers, stuck with the practice squad, and he's been called up to the 53-man roster a handful of times. And that's a guy that was an undrafted free agent who no one really, he didn't really have a productive, everyone, Scooter Harris is another guy, but he actually had a really good, productive, second team All SEC multiple times kind of career. Ramsey did not do that. He hardly played. And yet here he is, making a roster and being able to play on Sundays, not a starter or anything, but that shows you that there's a path for some of these guys to maybe do that at the next level. So I'm anxious to see if anyone does something similar to that based on, a really good showing at their pro day.
All right, well, we got to wrap this segment up. Up next, we're going to talk about some football recruiting. The Hogs landed a couple commits, also junior days last weekend and this weekend, I believe. And so we're going to talk about that. Then we're going to talk a little bit of basketball and get you set for the SEC tournament. And then we're going to talk some baseball, but it's a little awkward because we record this on Thursday and they play on Thursday. But we'll get to all that later here on the HawgBeat Hour.
You're listening to the HawgBeat Hour with Andrew Hutchinson, Alex Trader, and Mason Choate on ESPN Arkansas and HitThatLine.com. Now, here's your host, Mason Choate.
Welcome back to the HawgBeat Hour. Mason Choate, Andrew Hutchinson, and Alex Trader with you. Arkansas gets some commits in football, so it was a slow season for a little bit. Now it seems like all in 1 week, everything's starting to ramp back up. They get some commits. They had junior days, spring football starting, but let's talk about these commits. Hutch, I'll bring you in on Jordan Dominic, the transfer from Georgia Tech, and then they also got the 4-star linebacker Carson Dean. But Hutch, just tell us about Jordan Dominic. He's a defensive end. Arkansas needed some guys on the D-line, so this should probably help out.
Yeah, apparently they are still looking for some pass rushers to add to the defense. We all kind of speculated they were going to definitely go after some, defensive tackles, shore up the middle of that defensive line. But they went after this Jordan Dominic kid. He was the first one, or Arkansas was the first one to offer him as soon as he popped up in the portal. But he quickly got some other big-time Power 5 offers. Michigan State, Nebraska, Auburn, several others. And he told, he officially visited Arkansas. Arkansas was the first school that he visited. And it was over this past weekend. And when we talked to him afterward, he said, it was a great visit, sounded really encouraging, but he said, I'm going to visit Auburn next weekend. And the next thing you know, 24 hours later, he tweets out, woo, and then another tweet, pig, and then another tweet, suey, and committed to Arkansas on the spot. Obviously not going to visit Auburn anymore. Based on what I've seen from Auburn fans, they're pretty upset that they didn't even get a visit from him because they lost a ton of defensive linemen through the transfer portal. And he was a guy that they were really kind of looking at, getting in and helping them. So even if he doesn't play at Arkansas, you hurt your opponent by keeping him from going there. But I think he's going to be a guy that contributes. He's going to be a 5th-year senior guy, but he could also play another year, a 6th year, if he gets if he uses the COVID year. But he's a guy that has proven track record. He's not like a all conference caliber guy, but he's a guy that has started at Georgia Tech, in the ACC. He's put up decent stats, graded out, okay from Pro Football Focus. So he's a guy that I think they're counting on coming in May. He's not going to be here during spring, obviously, since he just committed and the semester is well underway. But he's supposed to get here in May, and he's going to join the team. And I think he's going to compete, for a starting spot like we saw last year with, Trey Williams, John Ridgway, and Markel Etsy coming in during the summer. They came in and competed and were able to start. So that's what I expect from Jordan Dominic.
Arkansas also got a commit from 4-star linebacker Carson Dean, third 4-star prospect for Arkansas in the 2023 class. Let's see. He committed after coming to Georgia junior days. Alex, and tell us about him. Did you see him? Did you get to talk to him? And what do you just know about Carson Dean?
Yeah, unfortunately, I wasn't able to talk to him, and he picked up his offer Saturday. So it didn't take him long after grabbing that to make the decision to come to Arkansas. Kind of came out of nowhere. I think Thursday, even last week on the podcast, me and Hutch both said, like, hey, in the first round of junior days, we had commit, back to back from Haz and Caleb James and Everett Rousseau. And we weren't expecting that this time around. I don't know that there was anyone on the radar of committing. And then just like that, you have Carson Dean coming in. Second linebacker commit, joins Everett Rousseau on that defensive position group. Had offers from just about everyone in Texas, Baylor, Houston, as well as TCU, SMU, and Texas and Texas Tech. So beating out Texas Tech was a big one there, considering what they just did with a big time safety prospect that Arkansas was looking at. I think it's a massive get for the defense, not necessarily inside that Rivals 250 group with the updated rankings right now, but 14th outside linebacker in the country. You're certainly not going to complain about that.
So as far as junior days last weekend went, just give us some takeaways that you had, Alex, because I know that you were covering that.
Yeah, the staff sent out, they were pretty liberal with the offers. We're able to give out a couple of big-time offers on the offensive line, and Luke Brown and Joe Crocker. Hosted two of the prospects who we saw were rated in the top 3 for the 2024 class, and Ryan Wingo and Colin Simmons. And both of them were very, very happy with the way that their visit went. From talking to them, we were able to kind of gather that, Simmons, he said Arkansas is currently in his top 5. So that's a massive bit of news for one of the top prospects in the 2024 class. Out of Duncanville too. So you have that pipeline with Jordan Crook, as well as, having a ton of offers coming or going to Duncanville over the last couple of years. And then I think the biggest takeaway that was kind of expected with Trayon Webb being scheduled to come to town didn't happen because he needed to reschedule that. But Arkansas did land an official visit on his schedule. So I think that, it is pretty telling that even though he wasn't able to make it this weekend, he planned out an official visit for I believe it's in June. Hutch, you can correct me if I'm wrong on that one.
Go ahead.
Yeah, he's coming in June. I believe it's an official visit, as you said. So that's a big one to be looking forward to.
All right. Also, this Saturday, there's also going to be some prospects on campus. Hutch, you've put together a list over at HawgBeat.com. Maybe highlight a couple of the guys that are coming on the campus. I know you talked about TJ Metcalf in the past. You were a little bummed that you didn't mention that he's related to DK Metcalf. So now you can get that in there. And tell us a little bit about some of the other guys.
Yeah, I think that the number one thing, if you look at this list, which again is on HawgBeat.com on the trough, our premium message board, it seems like Dominic Bowman, the new defensive backs coach, is really putting in work on the recruiting trail. Obviously, these guys, just because they're coming doesn't mean, like coming to a junior day or a prospect day, doesn't mean they're actually going to commit. But the fact that you're getting some of these guys, I mean, I count 1, 2, 3 4-star defensive backs, three, maybe 4 4-star defensive backs that are coming in to visit this weekend. That doesn't even include TJ Metcalf, who's a 5.73 star. and as you said, is a cousin of DK Metcalf. So he's got good bloodlines there. There's also several other defensive backs that are coming in. There's a 2024 that Dominic Bowman had recruited at Marshall, making the trip all the way from Virginia. So it just seems to me that that's my number one takeaway is like, holy cow, Dominic Bowman is, not wasting any time getting this, recruiting going. Everyone was kind of worried about that because Sam Carter was such a good recruiter. And then also along those lines is Dallas Young, the 5.7 3-star commitment from Alabama, is going to be at Arkansas this weekend. He actually went to Ole Miss with a couple of his Alabama buddies the last weekend. So you kind of worry like, oh gosh, is he going to maybe try to follow Sam Carter? But he is going to be in Fayetteville this coming weekend. That's a good thing to see. And then my other big takeaway is the 2024s. I mean, I know Alex touched on this in that they hosted two of the top 3 overall players. And we're talking 5-star players this past weekend. They're also going to be bringing in a 6.0 4-star, number 18 overall in that 2024 class, which is 5-star range whenever they get around to giving out more 5-stars. Kavion Henderson, another Alabama prospect, defensive end. He was here in January, and now he's coming back in March. Again, doesn't mean you're going to get him, but the fact that you're getting this caliber of athlete on campus multiple times, that says something, because I don't remember Arkansas having this many high caliber players on campus that many times in the past. So to me, the staff is recruiting their butts off, and it's going really well so far.
I know that the first Rivals 250 for the 2024 class dropped. Alex, have you had a chance to look at that?
Yeah, I have. I know Hutch wrote a story about it, so I'm going to let him go a little bit more in depth. But just seeing where Arkansas is with some of these top level kids, these top talent kids, is really not something you were expecting coming into last season, but certainly not a couple of years ago. So that I think has to be a credit to Sam Pittman and what this staff's been able to do on the trail.
Yeah, I'm actually hoping we get to talk to Sam Pittman later today. And one of the things I'm going to ask him is if he's been surprised. Like, I'm curious if any of these 2024s have shown up on campus and Sam Pittman thought like, wow, I don't think that guy would have come to Arkansas my first year here, because Arkansas was in a totally different, stratosphere back then. I mean, they were coming off back-to-back 2-10 seasons. They just hired a career position coach. And then now all of a sudden they're bringing these guys in. I mean, we talked about, 2 of the top 3 recruits in the country have already visited on the same day. Again, I don't think we can say that enough. That is incredible. They've also hosted the number 7 overall recruit, DJ Lagway, a quarterback from Texas. He came during the season. I think I counted up like 9 of the top 100 recruits have been on campus already. Then several others, including a couple in-state guys. I mean, Braylon Russell's already committed. He's at number 187. Walker White, the quarterback from Little Rock Christian, got Razorback bloodlines, has not been offered yet. But you have to imagine Arkansas would be in a good spot if they choose to recruit him. He's number 147. So that's just kind of a snippet already. This early in the process, they've already had that many high caliber recruits on campus. So just again, really shows the kind of level, how much Arkansas has been elevated on the recruiting scene in a very short amount of time under Sam Pittman.
All right, we're going to wrap this up. We're going to talk some Razorback basketball headed into the SEC tournament, and then we're going to talk some Razorback baseball as well. Get you set for the weekend full of Arkansas sports here on the HawgBeat Hour.
You're listening to the HawgBeat Hour with Andrew Hutchinson, Alex Trader, and Mason Choate on ESPN Arkansas and HitThatLine.com. Now, here's your host, Mason Choate.
All right, we're back here on the HawgBeat Hour. The HawgBeat crew, Mason Choate, Andrew Hutchinson, and Alex Trader with you, talking Razorback basketball this segment. So we got to go back to the Tennessee game because we haven't talked to you since. So Arkansas lost 78-74. The game was not that close. Let's just be honest. Like, Tennessee dominated Arkansas most of the game, but somehow the Hogs stuck around. They kept themselves in the game. And, I mean, this is a team that doesn't go down without a fight, Hutch.
No, I mean, they got down by 24 in the first half. I think they were down 21 at halftime maybe. And I was at the baseball game that day, And I just kind of was like kind of casually watching, and I was like, oh, well, I guess I don't have to pay attention to the second half. And I just kind of kept it on in the background, would peek over there, like, oh, look, they're within 15. Oh, look, they're within 11. And then all of a sudden, it's a single digit game down the stretch. And, Arkansas, you could make a case, kind of blew it in the closing seconds because JD Note had the ball. I think they got a rebound about 30 seconds left down to JD Note, tries to throw it ahead to Devo Davis for a layup that would have tied the game, but he overthrew him for a turnover. Then Tennessee missed a free throw, left the door open, and Arkansas had a chance to tie it with a three, and JD Note didn't connect. But still, I mean, the fact that they had a couple of looks in the closing seconds to tie or win, that is crazy considering they got down by so much in the first half. If they can play like they did in the second half, then they're going to be tough to beat.
The big story going into this game was Au'Diese Toney was not going to play. Well, actually, wasn't he supposed to play a few minutes and then he just ended up not playing the game?
Yes, I mean, I don't think anyone knew that he was even hurt. Apparently, he got hurt with about 3 minutes left against LSU. I don't remember that, but he was hurt. He was supposed to be on a limited minutes, like 5 to 7 minutes each half. And then comes to find out, like right before tip-off, Eric Musselman finds out that, no, he can't go at all. And so he watched from the sideline in a boot.
So that's unfortunate for Arkansas because now they're expecting him to probably not play in the SEC tournament, and moving forward from there, you don't really know yet. But so he didn't play against Tennessee, but the Hogs still stuck around. You did see some names that you haven't seen in a while. KK Robinson and Jackson Robinson both played. They combined for about 11, 12 minutes. But Hutch, do you think that was just you gotta throw somebody in there? They were trying to figure something out at the time, or do you think those were some meaningful minutes for those guys?
I don't think you could really read too much into those guys playing. I think it was a matter of they were getting their butts kicked, and Eric Musselman said, you know what, screw it. We're going to put everybody in there, and we'll see if it could help. And it didn't. I mean, I was not particularly impressed with KK. Jackson Robinson did hit 1-3. I think he missed another. They did okay, not just terrible, but they're not going to take anyone's spot in the rotation. I mean, Eric Musselman basically said it the other day, even if Au'Diese Toney is not able to play in the SEC tournament, which is still up in the air, but didn't sound particularly encouraging the other day. But if he doesn't play, there's basically like a 7-man rotation. It's the other 4 starters that have been starting, plus either Devo or Kamani or Chris Likes. So I think those are going to be the guys. I don't think either one of the Robinsons did enough in their minutes to warrant, more playing time in the postseason.
Before we move on to the SEC tournament, I just want to ask, it seemed like the final shot that JD Note took against Tennessee was the same exact shot that he took against Alabama. I know it wasn't like the exact same thing, but it was about the exact same thing. And I'm curious, you think that's what they draw up, or do you think that's just what happens, Hutch?
Well, the difference between those two plays, the Alabama one was so frustrating because it was just a 2-point game. And so he could have, I think maybe it was even a 1-point game. All I know is he could have gone, drove to the basket, drawn contact, made free throws, and it would have been fine. They didn't need a 3-pointer. And he settled for that 3. Against Tennessee, they needed a 3. And you could argue that there was contact on that play. Eric Musselman was asked about it if he thought there was a foul, and he said no comment because he didn't feel like getting fined that day. And JD Note was asked about it, and he said, I definitely think there could have been a foul, but you just got to play through it. I mean, you're on the road. He just kind of chalked it up as that's part of the game. But, yeah, I mean, it's tough. I mean, could you have used him as a decoy and gotten a 3 for Stanley Amude or something like that? Perhaps. But JD Note is your dude. He is your SEC Player of the Year candidate, although he didn't win, which I agree with. I think Oscar Tshiebwe was the rightful winner of that award. But he was the guy that was being talked about in that conversation. So when you've got a guy like that, you want him taking the shot. You want Mason Jones taking the shot in Eric Musselman's first year. You want Moses Moody taking the shot last year. you want JD Note taking a shot this year, unless you can drop something where you get a wide open, fantastic look for Stanley Mude. But I doubt that would happen in the closing seconds. That would have been pretty tough. So, I mean, I was okay with it, although I definitely understand the frustration from Arkansas fans.
Okay. But you mentioned it there, but also JD Note, Jalen Williams, first team All SEC. Jalen Williams All Defensive Team as well. So those are the honors. But let's talk about the SEC tournament. And Alex, I'll finally bring you in on this. Arkansas, they're probably going to play LSU as long as LSU can beat Missouri. And I don't see how Missouri would beat LSU, but LSU is a team that they gave Arkansas a run for their money the last time they met there in Bud Walton Arena. Just like the Tennessee game, it felt like Arkansas just lost that game all game long. And against Tennessee, they did lose the game, but against LSU, they won. And so, I mean, it's kind of a crappy draw for Arkansas that you got to play that LSU team again. Hard to beat a team 3 times.
Yeah, it is. And you get that familiarity. Arkansas does have the benefit of winning it at home as well as on the road. So it's not like it was a home split and you're having to see who the better team is on a neutral site. I think we can all kind of see who the better team is. And this loss Saturday, it did look like it was going to be really, really bad. Like Hutch said, coming out of the gate, like it almost looked unwatchable from just a casual trying to enjoy the game perspective, because it was going to be, it was all just talking about North Carolina and Duke, and then you had the 20-point game that you were watching. But what you did see was fight, and you also saw that in the Alabama game. Arkansas was down double digits in the second half of that one on the road as well. So I don't think you're going to get a team that quits in any game, no matter what it looks like going through the rest of the postseason. LSU is a tough draw because they do have that physicality down low, and we saw that on display last time they played in Bud Walton Arena. But I almost think that you use the Tennessee game as a bounce back, just to get yourself right before the tournament. You want to be able to pick up at least this LSU game, because you will have to have a bit of a tougher draw going throughout the rest of the SEC tournament if you're able to win it. But at least getting that one get right game to where you're kind of able to figure some things out before the big dance is going to be a big deal from us.
Yeah, I'm okay. So if Arkansas beats LSU, then they're probably going to play Auburn. I don't see Florida or A&M beating Auburn. So, Hutch, I'm curious what you think. So if Arkansas loses to LSU, they're one and done in the SEC tournament. I mean, that they're still going to the NCAA tournament, but if they kind of get beat by double digits, I mean, does that change your mind on anything?
No, to me, I think everything, the regular season is what matters. I mean, I think Eric Musselman almost has very similar Dave Van Horn feelings about the SEC tournament, where it's like, we're not going to try to kill ourselves to win this thing. You know, they're not going to push Adis Toney back to play before he's ready. They're not going to do anything they wouldn't normally do to try to win a game just because it's the SEC tournament, because they have their eyes on the NCAA tournament. That's the one that matters. And so I don't think that they're gonna, anything that happens in that LSU game or Missouri, depending on how that result plays out, is going to change that. I feel like, I mean, now if Missouri did beat LSU and then they beat Arkansas, then I would be a little bit concerned, because Missouri is terrible, and that would be just devastating. That would probably knock you down a seed line. To me, if you lose to LSU, as long as you don't get blown out, I don't think you're going to drop a seed line. At least you shouldn't, in my opinion. I think they should be solidly a 4 in the NCAA tournament. Again, I'm not a bracketologist, so who knows? But that's kind of how I see it, is that the SEC tournament, I don't think is going to move the needle one way or the other too much.
Okay, I know you said you're not a bracketologist, but what if Arkansas beats LSU, beats Auburn, and then you're probably going to have to beat Kentucky or Tennessee in the championship? What if Arkansas wins it all? How high do you think that could possibly move them up in the NCAA tournament?
In that scenario, I think they should be a 3 seed. I mean, you can't tell me they shouldn't be, because they would have already, I mean, they've already beaten those 3 teams at home. Then if you beat them on a neutral site as well, And that would make you, let's see what they went 14-2 down the stretch, I want to say. So that would make you 17-2 in your last 19 games. Whew, that is really good. I don't care if you lost to Hofstra and Vanderbilt. To me, that you should 100% be a 3 seed. Will they do it? Will they allow the SEC tournament to move the needle that much? I don't know. That's the great thing about March, and you never know what the bracket's going to hold. But in that scenario, I think they should bump up a seed line.
Man, it's just crazy to sit here and think like a month and a half ago ish, we were talking about, is this team even going to make it to the NCAA tournament? Now you're talking possibly a 3 seed. So it's really crazy, to be honest with you. Anyways, we're going to move on from basketball. We got to talk some Razorback baseball before we get you on your way. Of course, if you want to hear more Razorback baseball talk, you can listen to the Diamond Hogs podcast. That is also on HawgBeat.com. So we'll talk about that next here on the HawgBeat Hour.
You're listening to the HawgBeat Hour with Andrew Hutchinson, Alex Trader, and Mason Choate on ESPN Arkansas and HitThatLine.com. Now, here's your host, Mason Choate.
All right, welcome back to the HawgBeat Hour. Mason Choate and Andrew Hutchinson with you here because Alex Trader hates baseball. That's right, I said it. Alex Trader hates baseball, so at him on Twitter and tell him he's a horrible person. So we're talking Razorback baseball right now, and the Hogs playing Illinois Chicago this weekend. We're not going to do a full in-depth preview of that because this episode comes out on Friday, and by then you'll have watched 2 games of Arkansas versus Illinois Chicago. So if you want to hear more about that series, and if you want to be calmed down by the voice of a baseball coach, go listen to the Diamond Hogs podcast because we talked about Illinois Chicago, and we had Kevin Bohannon, who knows his baseball. He knows Razorback baseball as good as anybody. And he helps to calm all the fans down who are freaking out, who don't understand baseball, and who think this Razorback team sucks. So, Hutch, let's ask you. You're not a coach, but I mean, you know baseball. Maybe you can calm some people down right now.
Yeah, I mean, you should never read too much one way or the other into these early season games. I mean, I've seen teams that went to Texas and beat 3 really good teams in a tournament type thing and then bomb out in 2016 and not even make the NCAA tournament. I've seen teams that really struggle early on. 2015 comes to mind where they were a bad team for the first half of the season and they end up making it to Omaha. So don't read too much into this. Now, that's not to say you can't make observations and have takeaways from, the first 10 games of the season, because you can. And the number one thing everyone's freaking out about is the offense. Are they going to be able to hit? That's a very valid question because so far it has not been pretty. I mean, they're hitting 254 as a team. That's really aided by a couple of really big outbursts against Nebraska, Omaha, and Southeastern Louisiana late in the series. So they're not hitting like you would expect. I mean, they've only got 8 home runs in 10 games. A big reason of that is that the weather conditions they played in have just been miserable. I mean, it's been cold. The wind has been blowing straight in. Dave Van Horn at the Swatters Club earlier this week, at the very beginning of the Swatters Club, he said they've hit 7 balls that would have been home runs had it not been for the wind. Then fast forward 45 minutes to the end of the Swatters Club, he mentioned 10 balls that would have been home runs. I'm sure if we would have asked him another hour later, he would have said 15. But it does seem like there have been some balls hit that should have left the yard, both at Baum-Walker Stadium and also down at Round Rock. And it just didn't happen because of the conditions. So, again, I think it's too early to hit the panic button, but it's not too early to say, okay, is this team going to be as good offensively as we expected?
Yeah, I talked to Michael Turner after last Friday's game, and he said that he thought he had 3 balls that were out of the park last Friday. And weather conditions, of course, that affects it. And so that is the unfortunate thing for Arkansas. It's a lineup that's probably going to hit for power more than anything. And if the weather conditions don't allow, then it turns into a lot of flyouts, and that does not turn into runs. So let's look at the lineup though, because you're probably so Braden Webb probably out of the lineup unless he's going to come in the ninth and play center field or something. Like that's what you're going to get from Braden Webb right now. A guy that a couple guys that we talked about on the Diamond Hawks podcast a little bit, but I want to ask you, Hutch, because you're an expert. Peyton Stovall and Brady Slavins. These are two guys at the plate that really need to start to carry their weight a little bit more. I'm curious. The reason we pair them is because both of them can play first base. And Slavins, I think Robert Stewart and I agreed that he probably doesn't need to be playing in the outfield anymore. So what do you think about that? You think he's just going to be DH? Maybe at some point he gets moved over to first if they want to hold Stovall out of the lineup. What do you think that they're going to do with those two guys? I mean, they're going to be in the lineup. I'm not saying they need to be taken out of the lineup. I'm just saying both of them have been underperforming so far.
Well, I think it's a very astute observation that Brady Slavins is not an outfielder. He does not look very comfortable at playing in right field, although I think that's a position he really wants to play because it would help his future a lot at the next level if he can be a power hitting corner infielder or corner outfielder. But yeah, I mean, simply put, he's striking out too much. I think after one of the games, which game was it? Can't remember, but I think Brady Slavins has struck out like 3 times, and Eric Musselman, good Lord, Dave Van Horn mentions, we've got a guy that, we've got people that are just striking out too much, not doing this, left-handed bat. Like he basically said Brady Slavins without saying Brady Slavins' name and called him out. And I mean, he's got 11 strikeouts in 30 at-bats. That's just too many. That's over a third of your at-bats. And you got to be able to put the ball in play because if he does put the ball in play, good things happen, because he hits the ball hard. I mean, his exit velocities have to be among the highest on the team. So yeah, he's an interesting case on what you do with him. And then of course, Peyton Stovall. Man, it's just one of those things where as a freshman getting off to a really slow start, it really reminds me of Andrew Benintendi. His freshman year, he had some big time struggles. He was a heralded guy that people thought was going to come in and just light the world on fire. Same thing happened with Caden Wallace last year early on. Like everyone forgets about it because he did so well in SEC play, but he really struggled in non-conference play early on before he turned it on and got going. You really hope Peyton Stovall can have a similar turnaround like that. But I'm not sure. I mean, he's having to experience some struggles for the first time in his career. This is a guy that just dominated the high school level. He dominated travel ball. He was a projected first round pick. And now here he is in the SEC and he's batting through the first 10 games of the season, 182. No one could have seen that coming. So I think they're going to keep him in the lineup. They're going to keep him hitting leadoff, although I feel like they should put Zach Gregory there. But they're going to keep giving him chances because they want him to know that they believe in him.
Let's transition over to the mound. I'm curious about the guys coming out of the bullpen, what you think. So it looked like for the first 2 weeks of the season, Cole Ramage was your guy, your number one guy out of the bullpen. And then against Southeastern Louisiana, he comes out. And let me pull up the stats here. Let's see. Ramage. He threw 1 inning on Friday night, gave up 2 hits, 3 runs, 3 earned runs, walked 2, struck out 1, also had a wild pitch. So it was not the best outing for Cole Ramage. I'm curious, do you still think that Ramage is going to be the number one guy out of the pen? Evan Gray has looked good. Evan Taylor has looked good. There's a lot of guys that who could come out of the bullpen and be good. We know Austin Ledbetter is going to start a game this weekend, but he looked really good out of the pen. Of course, you're only 3 weekends in, so it's a small sample size. But what do you think?
Yeah, I mean that outing by Cole Ramage was horrible. He actually didn't record an out. Like he came back and pitched the next day to pitch an inning, and so I know a lot of fans were ready to take him out to the pasture and just do away with him and never let him see a baseball field ever again. But I think that's a little bit of an overreaction based on the one outing. And I think people have kind of heaped this unfair expectation of they saw what he did the first couple of weekends and it reminded them of a guy named Kevin Kopps last year. And I think I made the comment to somebody that Cole Ramage is kind of like a great value Kevin Kopps. He's not going to be a guy that has an under 1 ERA and can pitch, 4 innings Friday and 4 innings Sunday and not give up a single run. that's just not Cole Ramage. Now, can he pitch for you twice? Could he close Friday's game with an inning and then also pitch 3 innings on Sunday or something like that and be mostly effective? I think so. I think he could have a sub 3 ERA, which is good and maybe even very good, but he's not going to be Kevin Kopps. And I think some fans kind of expect him just because, like, well, this guy sucks. So unless he's going to be Kevin Kopps, we don't need to pitch him. I don't think that's going to be the case. I think he's still going to be one of your top bullpen arms. I'm not ready to sell completely on that. So he's a guy that I look forward to seeing, how he pitches moving forward. But yeah, I mean, they've got lots of young options. I mean, Brady Tigert looked really good in a save. I liked what I saw from him. You mentioned Evan Taylor has been really good, hasn't allowed a hit yet in 3 innings. So they've got some guys that they're trying to figure out kind of what their roles are going to be and how they can use them. And I just think it's too small of a sample size to really know exactly what that bullpen is going to look like moving forward.
Yeah, it is a good thing that they have a lot of names, like you mentioned. I mean, one guy that I think of that, unfortunately, on the Diamond Hawks podcast, we recorded the entire episode, and then we realized the audio cord was not plugged in. So, but on the first take, I mentioned that Nick Griffin is a guy that I wanted to see more because Dave Van Horn has talked about him, said he might be their closer. So, I mean, you watched him more in fall ball than I did and some spring ball as well prior to the season. What do you think of Nick Griffin? Do you think he can come out and make an impact? And I mean, Dave Van Horn says he wants to see him, but why aren't you seeing him if you want to see him?
Well, he was going to pitch in the second game of last weekend's doubleheader against Southeastern Louisiana, but they run rolled and they didn't have to play the 9th inning. He was going to pitch then. But I do see him being a guy that could be a reliable bullpen arm. He's a guy they want to start in the future, but he's coming back from Tommy John. It's about 16 months removed by now, but it takes a little bit of time. I mean, everyone remembers Isaiah Campbell coming back from his injury. It took him a little bit. His first year, he was very sporadic, couldn't get deep into games. And then his next year, he was a dominant starter. Could we see something like that from Nick Griffin? Possibly. But this year, I see him being, I don't know, a closer. He could potentially be that, or he could be a guy that gives you, 1 or 2 really good innings in the middle of the game.
All right. Well, we don't have much time left, so I want to mention that all of our baseball content is going to be awesome over at HawgBeat.com this weekend. Myself and Hutch, we're going to be covering it for you. You can go over to the Trough. We'll have the game threads updating you with everything going on. We'll have the scoreboard, and then we'll also have the key takeaway stories from the games as well. As I mentioned earlier, by the time you listen to this, you have watched 2 games. But they're supposed to play Saturday at 2, and they're also supposed to play Sunday at 12:30. If they don't play Saturday, it's not going to be a doubleheader Sunday because UIC's got a curfew. But be looking out for all that content over at HawgBeat.com. And thank you guys for listening to the HawgBeat Hour.